Hey everyone, it's Anthony. In today's video, I'm going to talk about the 5 most memorable hikes I've been on and also share some geographical and geological facts about them. In the last 15 years, I've done quite a bit of hiking, in the Northeast, mostly within New Jersey and New York. However, the top 2 most memorable hikes I've done were in another Northeast state, which will be mentioned later. Ultimately, I like to hike more in the rugged western United States in parks such as Yellowstone and Yosemite. If you want to leave a comment about a favorite hike you've done, please do so in the comment section below. Let's get started with the countdown. Number 5 is a hike I've done many times, since it's relatively short and challenging at the same time. It's a hike called Breakneck Ridge in Cold Spring, New York. The hike is very popular during the warmer months, since in the winter, it can be extremely dangerous to climb with ice and snow. The main trailhead starts in a parking area off Route 9D. As you start, the hike doesn't seem too intimidating, but about a quarter of a mile in, the real fun begins. A large, nearly vertical outcrop of rock scrambles is what you're up against. Here you'll have to be extremely careful climbing, as one mistake can result in an injury. After around a quarter or a third of a mile of this, you'll finally reach the first summit at around 600 feet in elevation. Although this is only about a quarter way through the hike, the first summit has some of the best views. There's a flag there with views out over the Hudson River and of the other mountains on the western side, including Storm King Mountain. On very clear days to the northwest, you can see the Catskills, which are around 45 miles away. After this summit, the hike continues to ascend another 600 feet to a maximum height of 1,260 feet. Once you make it here, you hike the ridge for around a mile until there's another trail that leads to a descent. This final trail leads back to Route 9D, but around a quarter of a mile down from the main parking area. Fourth on the list is a hike that's in northwestern New Jersey, which is known as Mount Tammany at the Delaware Water Gap. It's very easy to get here, as you take I-80 west to milepost 1 just before the Delaware Water Gap toll bridge. From the parking area, you start to climb at an elevation of around 330 feet up the Tammany Red Dotted Trail. This trail curves for around a mile up a steep ascent. Once the trail starts leveling out, you're at the summit of Mount Tammany, at an elevation of 1,500 feet. The views here are spectacular, as you can see the Delaware River and I-80 below. The I-80 aspect gives the hike a bit of an urban geographic feel, but you're so high up that you don't even hear the traffic. The other geological side of Mount Tammany is the rock profile. Geologically, the Delaware Water Gap is on Paleozoic-era rock dating over 250 million years ago. The periods of rock in this area is right between the Ordovician and Silurian period, and consists of mostly sedimentary rock, aged between 416 million to 480 million years ago. The types of sedimentary rock in this area include sandstone, conglomerate, which is basically just gravelstone, siltstone, shale, which is mudstone, and limestone. In fact, on top of Tammany, you can see the chemical weathering of limestone with some greenish tinted rocks. After the peak, there are multiple trails you could take in varying directions, but the one we took was one that went up and down and looped back to the Delaware River. The end of the hike went south down the banks of the river and ended by going under I-80 back to the parking area. Coming at third of my most memorable hikes was the longest one I've ever done. It was a Catskills hike that scaled 3 peaks: Slide Mountain, the highest, Cornell Mountain, and Wittenberg, and then reversed back to the beginning. The Catskill Mountains are rugged, but aren't actually geologically mountains. They're really a dissected plateau, which initially was flat, then naturally cut up by rivers and streams, making a series of valleys. Whatever they are, the ascents are still rigorous. The hike started on the western side of Slide Mountain. Initially, the hike started flat, but then started to get steeper and steeper. About an hour and a half later, we reached the peak of Slide Mountain. Even though it's the highest in the Catskills at 4,180 feet, the views are compromised by trees. After taking a break, we made our way to Cornell Mountain, but this involved going down around 1,000 feet, then up around 600 feet to the top of Cornell Mountain. This peak had somewhat better views, but was still compromised, so we made our way to Wittenberg. The good news was the trail followed the ridge, so the descents and the ascents were pretty mild. The trek to Wittenberg was worth it though, because it had the best views of all the 3, with impressive southward views towards the reservoirs and other forests. After staying for around a half hour, we made our way back to the beginning. Initially it was easy, but once we got to the valley between Cornell and Slide, it started to become extremely difficult because we had to ascend back up slide 1,000 feet. Needless to say, we did it and then descended back to the parking area. The total mileage for this hike was 13.5 miles, and it took nearly 6.5 hours. It was a great hike, but I wound up getting painful blisters on my feet. Rounding out the top two are both out of the area hikes for me. Both were in the state of Vermont. Second on the list was the highest peak in Vermont, Mount Mansfield, which stands at almost 4,400 feet, the highest elevation I've ever been besides a plane. This hike started at a trailhead on Mountain Road at around 1,700 feet. Like the other hikes, it started as a gradual ascent, but became increasingly steeper. Closer to the summit, there were a few rock scrambles that had to be traversed. After doing that, we finally reached the summit. The views from the top were magnificent. It was clear, and I was able to see Mount Washington, New Hampshire's highest peak, known for its extremely crazy weather. After spending about a half hour at the peak, we started to make our way to another trail that descended the mountain. However, we were unable to find it and saw the ski slopes. So instead, we trekked down nearly 3,000 feet of ski slopes to the bottom. Subsequent to the hike, we went to a pub in Burlington for a big dinner. The first and most memorable hike on my list is another Vermont peak about 20 miles south of Mansfield, called Camel's Hump. It was in early October, and I was staying at Stowe, Vermont with friends for the long Columbus Day weekend. We got up on Sunday morning to crisp autumn conditions, but noticed that the peaks of the mountains had snow on them, including Camel's Hump. Still, we decided to do the hike. At the bottom, trails were just wet, not icy. After ascending for some time, the trail started to become progressively snowier. Towards the peak, there was at least 3 inches of snow on the ground. Finally, we got to the peak, which probably had close to 5 inches of snow on the ground. At nearly 4,100 feet, the summit of Camel's Hump had some of the best views I've ever experienced in any hike, as there were a full 360-degree views in every direction. Also, it was clear when we got to the top, so clear that I was able to see Montreal Hall from 90 miles away. I told my friends, but they couldn't see it and they did not believe me. But I did see it, and I did read online afterwards that Montreal Hall is indeed visible from Camel's Hump. Overall, Camel's Hump was my all-time favorite hike. After the hard work, we went down the mountain to get some apple cider donuts in Stowe, which are delicious. Hiking is a great way to explore the great outdoors, and it's even more impressive as a geographer. It's interesting to see how high the elevations are at peaks, how steep the ascent is, and climatic variations, especially what we experience on Camel's Hump. Again, if you have a memorable hike that you'd like to share, or any recommendations on hiking trails, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching my video. Until next time!